Emily Carter was just 21, a bright college student with a promising future, until one ordinary Halloween night she vanished after stepping into what she thought was her rideshare. Days later, her lifeless body was found buried in the woods, brutally stabbed 14 times. Now, police say the man behind it wasn't a stranger. He had been watching her for weeks. It was the kind of night that makes people drop their guard. The crisp October air was sharp, but not biting. The campus was alive with laughter, music, and the crunch of dry leaves beneath sneakers and boots. Students in Halloween costumes flooded out of houses and dorm buildings, all glowing with orange lights and fake cobwebs. Some wore elaborate outfits, others grabbed last-minute ones thrown together with a hoodie and some eyeliner. Emily Carter had chosen something simple. Black jeans, a matching black top, and a pair of fuzzy cat ears clipped into her dark brown hair. She had drawn on whiskers with makeup and dabbed black on the tip of her nose. Her friends said she looked cute. She didn't need much. Emily had a soft face, kind eyes, and a calm presence that made people feel comfortable around her. That night, she had gone to a house party a few blocks from her dorm. It was packed, too loud, too warm, and too many people she barely knew. After a while, she texted her roommate that she was heading back early. She didn't feel like drinking and had a quiz on Monday. It was just after 11:30 p.m. when she pulled out her phone and ordered a rideshare. She didn't think twice about it. It was something she'd done dozens of times before. Tap, wait, ride, done. The app said her driver, a man named Kevin, was on his way in a silver Toyota Camry. Estimated wait time, 6 minutes. Emily stood near the curb, just outside the glow of the porch light. Her breath showed faintly in the air. She kept glancing at her phone, watching the little car icon move slowly toward her. Around her, the street was active, but not chaotic. Couples stumbled by in costume. Music thumped from a nearby house. A group of guys walked past, laughing, wrapped in capes and clown masks. Emily barely noticed them. She was focused on her screen. At 11:42 p.m., a silver sedan pulled up. It looked like a Camry. The headlights were on, but the windows were tinted. It didn't roll down or flash its lights, just stopped. Right in front of her. Emily hesitated for only a second, then walked toward it. She glanced at the phone again. No new notifications, still waiting for Kevin. But the car matched the color, and it was exactly where the app had told her to wait. She opened the rear passenger door, stepped inside, and closed it behind her. No one saw where the car went. No license plate was captured on camera. The street camera just showed the silver vehicle pulling off, tail lights glowing red as it disappeared into the night. When her roommate woke up the next morning and saw Emily's bed untouched, she assumed Emily had crashed at someone else's place. By noon, she began to worry. By evening, she was calling everyone Emily knew. No one had heard from her. No texts, no Snapchats, no social media posts. Emily had simply vanished. Campus police treated it casually at first. Young people leave unexpectedly all the time. Maybe she ran off. Maybe she lost her phone. But her family knew better. Emily wasn't careless. She wasn't impulsive. She was the kind of person who always let someone know where she was going, who always answered her texts. The rideshare driver she was supposed to meet confirmed she had never shown up. He said he waited for 5 minutes, then canceled. The app showed the trip as incomplete. That meant the car she had entered was not his. By the time police realized what had happened, Emily had been missing for more than 24 hours. There were no calls from her phone, no card activity, no sign of where she'd gone. One wrong decision, one small mistake, and she was gone, and somewhere out there, the driver who wasn't her driver was still driving. Emily's disappearance hit the campus like a sudden storm, unexpected, confusing, and deeply unsettling. Posters with her photo, smiling, innocent, framed in soft brown hair, were taped to lampposts, bulletin boards, and dorm entrances. Students whispered about what might have happened. Some thought she'd gone home suddenly. Others suspected she was hiding out after a mental health crisis. But the ones who knew her best felt something else entirely: fear. Her parents arrived on campus Monday morning, tired, pale, and shaking. They went straight to the police station. They knew their daughter, Emily, was responsible, grounded, and cautious. She called or texted her mother every night without fail, even just to say goodnight. She had plans for the weekend: notes for a paper, a shift at the library help desk, a coffee meetup with a friend. Nothing about her life suggested she'd walk away from it. Nothing pointed to someone ready to vanish. The police reviewed surveillance footage from the area around the house party. At first, it felt like a dead end. The streets were too crowded, the lighting too dim, and the angles too awkward to identify cars clearly. But eventually one camera caught a brief, grainy view from across the street. In the frame, Emily stood alone near the curb, her arms crossed to keep warm. Then a car pulled up. She opened the door, stepped inside, and was gone. Investigators slowed the footage down, again and again. The vehicle looked silver, maybe a Camry, maybe not. The license plate was unreadable, blurred, shadowed, and half-wrecked by a passing pedestrian. That pedestrian, by the time police tried to locate him, had left campus for fall break. There was no way to ask what he had seen. The rideshare logs confirmed what Emily's friends already feared. She had never entered the car assigned to her. The driver she was waiting for canceled after she didn't show up. The app recorded no trip. It was as if she had climbed into a stranger's car by accident. Or worse, been lured into one that had been waiting for someone like her. Panic rippled through the campus. Girls stopped walking alone at night. Students double-checked license plates and demanded drivers confirm their names. Classes were quieter. Eyes darted to every unfamiliar car. Parents flooded the university with phone calls, and still no answers. Then, on the 6th day, a couple hiking along a wooded trail near the edge of Pine Hollow State Park stumbled upon something strange. A black hoodie crumpled near a cluster of rocks. The woman picked it up, curious at first, then noticed the smear of dirt, the torn fabric, and something hard in the pocket. It was a cell phone, cracked, powered off, locked with a 6-digit passcode. They called the police. When detectives arrived, they carefully bagged the hoodie and the phone. A search team was dispatched immediately to comb the area. Within hours, the phone was confirmed to be Emily's. Her background photo, a snapshot of her and her younger brother in front of a birthday cake, flashed briefly on the screen before it shut off again. The battery was nearly drained, but data pulled from it showed no texts or calls after 11:42 p.m. the night she disappeared. It wasn't enough to explain what had happened, but it was enough to know one thing. She didn't run away. She didn't ghost anyone. She hadn't gotten cold feet or second thoughts. Something had gone terribly wrong that night, and now they had proof she had been far from campus. What no one could yet explain was why. Why this trail? Why that location? And what had happened in the hours after she got into the wrong car? The search for Emily was no longer just a missing persons case. It had become a race against time. The rain came on the 9th day. A slow, cold drizzle soaked the forest soil and turned every leaf slick and dark. Search teams moved carefully, wrapped in ponchos, heads bowed beneath hoods, combing through the dense underbrush of Pine Hollow State Park. This was where Emily's phone had been found 3 days earlier, and it had become the epicenter of the search. Police had already brought in dogs, drones, and even volunteers from nearby towns, but so far they had found nothing. No clothing, no blood, no signs of life or death until that morning. At around 10:17 a.m., an officer on foot patrol noticed something strange along a narrow deer trail that wound downhill into a steep ravine. There was a subtle disturbance in the dirt, an unnatural patch, darker than the surrounding soil and pressed down like something heavy had been there. He called it in. Within the hour, crime scene units were on site, their gloves bright against the gray landscape. As they cleared away the top layer of earth and leaves, the truth revealed itself in layers too horrific to forget. Emily's body was discovered curled into herself in a shallow depression beneath the roots of a fallen tree. Her black jeans were still intact, her shirt torn along one side. Her hands were clenched tight, as if she had been fighting until the very end. Her face was pale, lips parted slightly, eyes closed. Beside her were pieces of her Halloween costume, a cat ear headband snapped in two, strands of her long brown hair tangled in the plastic. The medical examiner was called immediately. The early signs were brutal. Multiple stab wounds to the chest and abdomen, deep and frantic, as if the attack had been fueled by rage rather than control. 14 in total. No defensive wounds on her hands, but scratch marks lined her upper arms, like she had been grabbed hard or restrained. There were no signs of sexual assault, no jewelry, no shoes. Her ID and wallet were gone. She had been killed the same night she went missing, likely within hours of getting into that car. The exact time of death would come later, but the conclusion was clear. Emily had not wandered into danger. She had been taken, murdered, and left in the woods to rot. The discovery shattered the hope her parents had clung to. The press conference was quiet. Her mother could barely speak. Her father stood behind her, his face expressionless, as if frozen by grief too large to process. The campus held a candlelight vigil that night. Students gathered in silence, many wearing black, some holding signs that simply read, "She deserved to get home safe." But behind the mourning, behind the headlines and flowers and statements of sorrow, police were already shifting focus. Whoever killed Emily had done so with violence and speed, but also they had driven her nearly 20 miles from where she was last seen. They had chosen a place remote, hidden, far from traffic or houses, and they had taken time to hide her body. Just enough to delay discovery, but not so deep as to suggest a professional crime. This wasn't a random act of violence on a trail. She had been brought here. This location was picked for a reason. Her father stood behind her, his face expressionless, as if frozen by grief too large to process. The campus held a candlelight vigil that night. Students gathered in silence, many wearing black, some holding signs that simply read, "She deserved to get home safe." But behind the mourning, behind the headlines and flowers and statements of sorrow, police were already shifting focus. Whoever killed Emily had done so with violence and speed, but also they had driven her nearly 20 miles from where she was last seen. They had chosen a place remote, hidden, far from traffic or houses, and they had taken time to hide her body. Just enough to delay discovery, but not so deep as to suggest a professional crime. This wasn't a random act of violence on a trail. She had been brought here. This location was picked for a reason. Detectives reviewed maps, tracking known offenders, unsolved cases, and wilderness paths. They looked for patterns, for names, for anyone with connections to this park. The first break came not from a fingerprint or a shoe print, but from a gas station 12 miles from where the body was found. A manager had seen the news and called police. He remembered a man showing up early the morning after Halloween, paying in cash, and washing the back seat of his car with bottled water and paper towels. He said the man looked calm, but his hands were shaking. The tip from the gas station clerk reignited the investigation like a match to dry tinder. Police rushed to the location, a small 24-hour station just off a rural highway seldom traveled by college students. Surveillance footage showed exactly what the manager had described. At 7:13 a.m., the morning after Emily disappeared, a man in a black hoodie and baseball cap pulled into the lot in a dark gray Nissan Altima. The car looked dusty, its back bumper dented. The man exited quickly, glancing around nervously before walking inside. He purchased 2-gallon jugs of water, a bottle of bleach, and an armful of paper towels. He paid in cash. No loyalty card, no ID. Then he stepped outside and spent nearly 20 minutes scrubbing the back seat of the car. He opened all 4 doors, working with an intensity that seemed manic. He poured water across the seat cushions and wiped repeatedly. When finished, he dumped the paper towels into a plastic bag and shoved it into the trash bin beside the pump. He drove off in the direction of Pine Hollow State Park. Detectives retrieved the bag from the station's trash container. Inside were blood-stained towels. A forensic test later confirmed the blood was Emily's. But the footage offered more than just evidence. It offered a partial plate number. Investigators used it to trace the car to a 26-year-old man named Kyle Benson, who lived alone in a small basement apartment on the outskirts of town. He had no stable job, no close friends, and a history of minor infractions: trespassing, vandalism, disorderly conduct. But the deeper police dug, the more disturbing the profile became. Kyle had worked briefly as a rideshare driver. Multiple complaints had been filed about his behavior: staring at female passengers, taking long routes, refusing to speak. 2 riders reported feeling unsafe during their trips with him. One claimed he followed her after dropping her off. Eventually, his account was deactivated, but Kyle still had the car, and he had never stopped driving around campus areas late at night. He simply wasn't getting paid for it anymore. His phone records placed him near the college the night Emily vanished, and just hours later, within a mile of where her body was found. That alone wasn't enough for an arrest. But then came the most chilling discovery yet. When police executed a search warrant on Kyle's apartment, what they found turned the case from disturbing to truly horrifying. Inside a plastic storage bin beneath his bed were items that didn't belong to him: a pair of black sneakers with dried mud, a costume headband with cat ears, and a broken phone charger identical to the kind Emily's roommate said she always carried. There was also a notebook, pages torn out, others scribbled with sentences that made little sense. Some were about rejection, others about being invisible, and some sounded like plans. In one passage, he wrote about correcting fate and taking back control. Another page read simply, "Don't wait for the perfect one. Just choose one who won't be missed." The evidence was mounting, but prosecutors needed more. That's when investigators discovered Kyle's dashcam, still installed in his car. Although it hadn't recorded the night of Emily's disappearance, having been switched off, its memory card hadn't been wiped. Footage revealed days, even weeks, of Kyle slowly circling different college campuses. He appeared to be watching women as they waited outside dorms or stood alone by curbs. Sometimes he followed them in his car for several blocks before peeling off. His pattern was clear. He was hunting. The idea that Emily had randomly entered the wrong car no longer seemed like a tragic coincidence. It looked like a trap. And Kyle Benson had been setting it for a long time. The arrest came just after midnight. Officers surrounded Kyle Benson's apartment with tactical precision, moving in silently, their flashlights cutting through the shadows. Kyle didn't resist. He opened the door in sweatpants and socks, blinking as if he'd just woken up from a long nap. He didn't ask why they were there. He didn't say a word. The detectives later described his expression as vacant, like someone who had expected this moment, maybe even waited for it. News of the arrest spread across campus like wildfire. Social media exploded with relief, rage, and grief. Candlelight vigils turned into rallies for safer transportation policies. Students demanded tighter rideshare regulations and better campus surveillance. Emily's photo, once a symbol of hope, became a haunting reminder of vulnerability. For her family, the arrest brought a grim kind of closure, but not peace. The district attorney announced that Kyle Benson would be charged with first-degree murder, kidnapping, and evidence tampering. In the official timeline, Emily was last seen at 11:42 p.m. The prosecution believed Kyle had been circling the area, posing as a rideshare driver. His car matched the general description in her app, enough to fool someone for a split second in the dark. He never used the app. He didn't need to. He just waited for the right opportunity. The motive was less clear. Kyle had no connection to Emily, no shared classes, no online interactions. They weren't friends, not even acquaintances. He had simply seen her and decided that she would be the one, a random selection that ended in a targeted, calculated crime. In court, Kyle pleaded not guilty. His attorney floated vague suggestions of mental illness and disassociation, but the evidence was overwhelming: the dashcam footage, the blood-stained towels, the items recovered from his apartment, and the digital trail placing him in all the right and wrong places. The prosecution painted a chilling picture: a lonely, unstable man who spent months fantasizing about control, then found a way to make it real. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The courtroom was packed daily with students, journalists, and community members. Emily's parents sat in the front row, holding hands. They listened to the forensic experts describe the violence their daughter endured. They watched surveillance clips frame by frame. They sat through the reading of messages Kyle had written in his notebook. They didn't cry, not publicly, but their pain was unmistakable. When the verdict came in, guilty on all counts, there was no celebration, just silence, as if the finality of the word brought a new, heavier grief. Kyle was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He showed no reaction, just stared blankly, like someone already removed from the world. After the trial, Emily's university established a new campus safety initiative. It included designated rideshare pickup zones, enhanced lighting, mandatory license plate checks, and a live tracking system that required riders to confirm the identity of their driver before entering any vehicle. Her parents also started a foundation in her name, focused on educating students about rideshare safety and supporting victims of violent crime. But even with justice served, one fact remained unchanged. Emily Carter had trusted the world enough to believe she would make it home that night. She had followed the rules. She had done what millions of people do every day, and still, it hadn't been enough. The horror of her story didn't lie in complexity. It lay in how easily it could happen to anyone. A moment of confusion, a shadow in the shape of safety, and a car door closing behind her. That's all it took. A college student got into the wrong car. And she never came back.